students to politicians, more and more Canadians start to think about the philosophical question: what is Canadian identity?
Yeah, what is Canadian identity?
That's a good question.
Isn't it, hey?
Yeah. So we search the word Canadian identity on the internet. Always it refers to the unique cultures, characteristics, and some symbols of being Canadian that make Canada distinct from other countries in the world.
We also learned a lot about this topic in our English class, while we gained some stereotypical knowledge about Canada. We realized that everyone has their own opinions of being a Canadian, and there's no exact correct answer for this question.
Therefore, we decided to seek our own conclusions by making this mini documentary. So let's go!
Let's go.
In order to find out what the true Canadian identity is, our first question is: what are some words that comes to your mind when you think of Canadians?
We're nice. We're because we apologize a lot. We say sorry a lot. It's because we see that we can make mistakes too, and we did. Not instead of looking at negativity in other people and looking at other people's mistakes, we recognize our own mistakes and we apologize for that. We're very peaceful and we respect everybody, no matter what their culture is, what their religion, what their background, what their ethnicity is, or color, or anything. And we respect them just the way they are, for just who they are.
Okay, so first thing that comes to mind when it comes to Canadians is usually we're very polite people. We say thank you and sorry a lot. We are peacekeepers usually, and did I say friendly already?
Yes.
Okay, because friendly, yeah. That's a few words that come to my mind.
人跟人之间比较友善，然后这种环境啊，生活环境也比较好，空气质量也比较好。就是说那个加拿大人对那个很注重这个对自然环境的保护，很有礼貌，很绅士，很热心，就是很喜欢帮助人。它是一个很包容的那个国家，而且都很善良，帮助那些难民呐或什么的，是吧
？Honestly, I think the first thing I think about is like big, because when you think about the population of Canada and how like small it is compared to the geographical size, it's kind of crazy. And like when you look at other countries like India or China and you look at how many people like per kilometer they have, it's just massive. And here it's like what, a few, like 4 or something.
Hey, Tim Hortons is another symbol of Canada. Except these stereotypical expressions of Canada. What does it truly mean to be a Canadian?
I think, like, for me personally, I take like a very literal definition to those identities. Like when I am labeling myself now, I think like, oh, where were you born, kind of thing. Like I'm a Canadian because I was born in Canada. Someone, or maybe even with like the legal system, like I'm a Canadian because I have Canadian citizenship. But then again, I have a friend who is technically an American citizen, but she would define herself as Mexican. So there's, like, I think everyone's kind of got their own definition, something like that. I think a Canadian is anyone who wants to call themselves that. You know, it's more of a self, like it's more of an opinion, I guess, because if you want to call yourself a Canadian, I'm not going to argue with that.
For me, to be Canadian, it means, again, just accepting everybody, just accepting every religion, every culture, every person for just who they are instead of looking at the differences. And that's what really makes us Canadians, is that we are a single nation, but we have like so many different cultures, but we still we all represent one nation and one thing, no matter how different we are. And that's what really Canada is. It's multicultural. Everything is different, but it's all together as one whole, and we live together peacefully.
So me being a little bit older, to me, being Canadian has pride. So pride is huge for me, and acceptance as a Canadian. We're accepted, and everyone's accepted when they come to Canada. So that's what it means to me to be Canadian a little bit. And just peace. You know, like I have freedom to do pretty much whatever. I love the healthcare, that we got free healthcare. That's awesome about being Canadian.
Here comes the last but the most important question. What is the interpretation of Canadian identity?
刚开始送你过去的时候，曾经遇到一个，我跟你那个杨阿姨一起在那个麦当劳吃饭，遇到了一个老人，是个女士，她当年参加过那个，说是她代表那个加拿大向我们道歉，说是当时二战期间给中国人造成了很多伤害，然后我觉得挺好，因为说一个国家的人。敢于就是说承担自己的那个过失，说是一个很坦诚的啊。
It's one of those things where, like, I don't know how to define that, like what a Canadian identity is, and even like I feel like it was simpler when I was younger and I didn't fully understand everything. You almost want to oversimplify it. You want to say like, oh well, like if you're born here, that's a Canadian, right, or something. But it's like once you understand other people's points of view, you kind of think like, oh, it's not that simple. Everyone kind of builds identity differently, and I think for almost everyone, like you build that based on like where you're from, or like at least some portion of it. That's probably one of the largest parts of what makes your identity is your environment as you're learning what that means. There's so many cultures here too it's hard to say what a Canadian culture is. There's the Indigenous peoples who have, like, I would say a true Canadian culture because that's the roots. When you look at like what's everyone else like, do we have Canadian culture, or is it just bits and pieces from all of it? It's hard to even say if there's such a thing as a Canadian identity, or if that is more of just a concept.
So Canadian identity for me is just being who you are, not changing your, not having to change your culture or your religion or your anything for being accepted by other people. Just because there's Muslims, there's Hindus, there's Sikhs, there's Christians, there's so many other religions and cultures, and so many people from different countries, and they're all accepted in Canada, and they're also recognized as Canadians. Just for who they are. They didn't have to change their culture. They didn't have to change their name. They didn't have to change anything. They are accepted for who they are, and they all identify as Canadians, no matter how different they are from each other and where they're from. They still identify as Canadians, and that's what Canadian identity to me is: being accepted for who you are.
My interpretation of Canadian identity is, I guess, acceptance. But I'm older, so I have a lot of issues with Canada. So with something, I sometimes think that us Canadians, forget about our identity and take on other identities. Like, why are we changing our Canadian anthem? I don't like that. It's like, keep our identity, because if we were to go to Trump and say, hey, change your American anthem, they would never do it. So Canadians need to keep our identity as peacekeepers and polite, and that we accept everyone, and everyone should accept us and our ways as Canadians, even if they don't coincide with your beliefs.
As all the interview are finished, we think we got the final conclusion. What is Canadian identity? Here's my opinion. Canadian identity refers to their acceptable and respectful towards all cultures. People in Canada have different skin colors, different religions, and different cultures. And each culture have their unique characteristics. Mostly, they might not fully understand your culture, but they seldom say anything bad about your differentness. They respect to other cultures, and they will willing to learn about your perspectives. For example, when my mom and I first arrived in Canada, at the airport in Vancouver, we didn't know what to do. The unfamiliar languages and weird signs painted on the wall and ceilings made us really nervous. We were trying so hard to find the correct location to get my study permit assigned, but we soon got lost. We were so panicked that we just stood at the same place, stared at the crowd that is walking in a hurry confusedly. Surprisingly and thankfully, a local guy came to us and talked to us in English. However, we were not that well trained in this language yet. My mom and I just nodded our head like the oil-produced machine, pretend that we can't understand what he was talking about. We tried to show him the passport, hoping if he can figure out where we should go. And luckily, he took us to the right place. He was so kind that he also helped us go over all the necessary procedures. I would like to mention this experience is because this really showed how kind-hearted and acceptable they are. No matter where the person comes from, once they get to the land of Canada, most Canadians are always willing to help. Therefore, I think the most important Canadian identity includes their tolerant attitude towards the cultural diversity in the country.
Now here's my conclusion. From my perspective, at the time we want to define people and cultures in Canada, we can never get the right interpretation as there isn't any. Since Canada is a big immigration country that's famous for its multiculturalism, it combines so many different cultures. Starting from the First Nation people, their distinctive cultures become an indispensable part to the modern country. In addition, Canadians are not only affected by their American neighbors, but also their European friends. Along with hundreds of years' influence, Canada makes up its culture in a wider range. Moreover, lots of new cultures emerged in Canada recently. For example, as more and more Asians immigrate to this country, Canada's Asian population increases rapidly. They brought the Asian cultures to Canada, mixed them with a variety of others, and composed the fascinating Canadian culture. Just as was Shane Coykin describing his poem, We Are More.
We are cultures strung together, then woven into a tapestry, and the design is what makes us more than the sum totals of our history.
Canada respects all of the cultures and ties them together. There's no single culture and that can represent the whole nation. Therefore, we can't just describe the characteristics of one culture in Canada, which means we won't have an exact expression for the Canadian cultural identity. Although people and cultures in Canada are so different that there isn't an identity that can correctly represent them, Canada as a whole nation is a unique country that has its own characteristics. From the Canadian beer commercial we watched in our class, we can see that lots of Canadians are trying to distinguish themselves from Americans, instead of focusing on what their true identities are. Canadians don't have to compare themselves from others to prove their unique characteristics, as when defining the nation, Canada is just an independent and growing country that has long valued their tradition of democracy, freedom, and tolerance. How Canada allows every ethnic group to exist unquestioned, as well as its special peacekeeping policy, have already made it distinct from each of other countries in the world. However, most importantly, being a Canadian is not only about how they have freedom and human rights, or how they have such a strong country stand behind to support them, but it's more about their responsibilities to obey Canadian laws, to support the right decisions the country made, and to contribute for building a better country.